So, thank you. It's 5 o'clock, Wednesday, May 7th here in Berlin. I welcome you all to the J7 press conference and with it the release of the J7 report. I welcome you here in the Leo Baeck House in Berlin, the office of the Central Council of Jews in Germany, and I welcome you online. I will just give a few remarks at the beginning. We will hear from all of our speakers brief statements at the beginning regarding the J7 report, regarding the situations in their countries. And afterwards, we will have the opportunity to a Q&A. I ask you kindly to switch on your microphone when you are speaking and then switch it off when you stop speaking. This is because we record the press conference and then we have a good quality afterwards. And now I will give the word to Dr. Josef Schuster, President of the Central Council of Jews in Germany. All the others, please remember to state your name, your organization and your position before you give your statement.
Josef Schuster, I am the President of the Central Council of Jews in Germany. As we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, it's a great honor for the Central Council to welcome the J7 representatives to Berlin and share our work, or just before, with Federal President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, among others. It is important to speak up, especially on those days of commemoration. With regard to the culture of remembrance, we are seeing a growing indifference in Germany, even to the point of relativizing the Shoah, even in parliaments. And this has consequences. 10% of teenagers and young adults in Germany have never heard of the Shoah. They don't even know the term Auschwitz. 40% don't know that around 6 million Jews were murdered in the Shoah. 15% are of the opinion that there were less than 2 million. This means that a large proportion of the young generation in Germany is completely ignorant of this period. We are seeing similar developments in all the J7 countries, and I'm glad that this strong task force exists. We have to fight this development with our partners. Thank you, and I will hand it over to Ambassador Marina Rosenberg for the ADL.
Thank you, Dr. Schuster. So I'm Marina Rosenberg. I'm Senior Vice President of International Affairs at the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, from the US. Thank you all for joining us today, those here present and those online, as we mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II and present our groundbreaking inaugural J7 report on global anti-Semitism. As we meet in Berlin today, the significance of this anniversary as it relates to the many current challenges our communities face is not lost on any of us. Since October 7th, 2023, our report documents what Jewish communities worldwide have experienced firsthand, a tsunami of anti-Semitism around the world. The numbers are alarming. Between 2021 and 2023, anti-Semitic incidents spiked 227% in the US, 185% in France, 83% in Canada, 82% in the UK, and 75% here in Germany. In Australia, we've seen an unimaginable 317% increase in 2024 alone. But these are not just numbers in a report. When we look at how many incidents occur per Jewish person in each country, the picture becomes even more alarming. Here in Germany, there were more than 38 anti-Semitic incidents for every 1,000 Jewish residents in 2023. This is the highest number among the J7 countries in that year. The victims are your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues. The violence is brutally real, from arson attacks on synagogues in Australia to shootings at Jewish schools in Canada, from an assault of a female student in Frankfurt here in Germany to the rape of a 12-year-old girl in France. This is our reality. Across all 7 countries, we're seeing the same troubling patterns: more violence, targeted attacks on synagogues and Jewish schools, rampant online hatred, Jews increasingly hiding their identity out of fear, and governments failing to hold perpetrators accountable. This is exactly why we formed the J7 task force, to bring together the 7 largest Jewish communities outside of Israel and say with one voice, enough is enough. Today, we're calling on every country to adopt and implement the global guidelines for countering anti-Semitism, practical steps to ensure Jewish communities can live safely and with dignity. Let's be clear. When hatred against Jews becomes acceptable and normalized, it undermines the very foundation of our democracies. The most meaningful tribute to Holocaust victims is not found in monuments, but in ensuring the Jewish communities can thrive without fear. 80 years after liberation, our reality requires more than commemorations. It demands action. And now I will pass it to Mauro Bernstein, President of the CIJA in Argentina. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. My name is Mauro Bernstein. I am the president of CIJA. This is a political association of Jewish community in Argentina. The situation in Argentina is explained by our annual report. We can highlight the sharp increase in anti-Semitism incident nationwide starting October 7. We increased 80% in 2023 compared with 2022. With the increase continue through 2024 is 14%. The most important is the 67% of this incident occurring in the social media. Now the report in the social media represented around 90% of the report made about Judeo-phobic incident. The anti-discrimination law has been in place in Argentina since 1988, protecting us against various forms of anti-Semitism. In 2020, the nation government adopted the CIJA definition of anti-Semitism, which has since been incorporated by various civil society organizations and government offices. Furthermore, in 2024, Argentina declared Hamas an international terrorism organization. Demonstration is clear support of the fight against terrorism. Also, during the first week of 2025, the Nation Congress gave approach to the trial of Ausen's law, which could representative progress in obtaining justice for the victim of the bombing 1994 in Amia, Daya. The current government of President Milei explicitly support the Jewish community and the state of Israel. In Argentina, we are focused on combating anti-Semitism, primarily on social media and with education, with 2 laws that we will send to the National Congress for just consideration. The first law seeks to make teaching about the anti-terrorism and discrimination mandatory in schools, and the second law seeks to establish an exception for social media guidelines on topics relative and the hate speech. For us, it's very important the government support. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Alex Rifchin. I represent the Australian Jewish community. The situation in Australia for the past 18 months is a warning to the world. It shows that even in a peaceful and successful multicultural society, anti-Semitism can take hold and in a matter of months fundamentally change the character of a country. We have seen how violent chants on city streets, slogans and boycott campaigns escalate into burning synagogues attacks on homes, including my former home, and even childcare centres. And we have seen that where governments and law enforcement act with indecision or live in the hope that the extremists will eventually exhaust themselves and the whole thing will go away, they are living in a state of delusion. We speak not only of Jewish death in remembering the Holocaust and the other crimes and tragedies inflicted on the Jewish people. We rightly also speak about Jewish life, how Jewish communities have contributed to the wealth, the culture and science of their countries out of all proportion to our numbers. When a situation develops as it has in Australia, and Jews are pushed out of industries which we have helped to build, boycotted and banned as a way of driving them from public view, Jewish life does not continue. And that is not merely a Jewish tragedy, it is a national tragedy. It is a tragedy for our countries and the cause of democracy and human freedom. Thank you very much. Hand over to Noah, representing the Canadian community.
My name is Noah Shack. I'm interim president of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs in Canada. The challenges facing the Canadian Jewish community are immense. Schools shot at, synagogues firebombed, Jewish-owned businesses vandalized, people harassed and assaulted in the streets. It's essential that our new parliament act quickly and decisively to deliver serious impact in the fight against anti-Semitism. It's not just the safety and well-being of our community that's at stake, but the future of a Canada where everyone can live free from hate and discrimination. Canada is hosting the G7 currently and has a leadership role to play in advancing the fight against this global scourge, which all of my colleagues here at the table are united in bringing to the forefront for the attention of all of our governments. With that, I'll pass the baton on to Jonathan Arfi from the CRIF in France.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Arfi. I'm the president of the Representative Council of Jewish Institutions in France. I stand alongside our G7 partners in raising the awareness of the world regarding the rise of anti-Semitism in a global arena, but specifically also in France. France was hit first by anti-Semitism at the beginning of the years 2000, after the start of the Second Intifada in the Middle East, and we suffered even from a killing of Jews in a school in Toulouse in 2012, and in a kosher grocery in 2015, and in other cases. But after October 7, we saw a dramatic rise in the number of attacks. With now a surge of about 400% of anti-Semitic incidents in the year following the October 7 attacks in the Middle East. We know that this anti-Semitism takes its source in the hatred of Israel, in radical Islam, but also in conspiracy theories over the social networks. So we do think that there is a huge need to have more regulation on online hate and to continue to raise the level of awareness among the citizens, because we know that the public authorities' action will not be sufficient. We need every citizen to consider it has a role to play. Thank you. And leave the floor to Adrian Cohen from the Board of Deputies in England.
Thank you, Jonathan. My name is Adrian Cohen. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. We represent 300 communities and organisations within the United Kingdom. Anti-Semitism doesn't recognise borders, and that's why we're part of the J7, and I'm very proud to be here with colleagues from the major diaspora communities. As you can see from what everyone has said, there are in many respects common features of the anti-Semitism that all of our communities have experienced. I should say that since 7th of October, the biggest spike in anti-Semitism was on the day itself and in the days which immediately preceded it. And that's before there was any kind of organised response to the atrocities that took place. And it shows that 7th of October triggered latent anti-Semitism. In other words, that these the hatred and bile that was always there, albeit hidden below the surface. And 2023-24 was a record year in the United Kingdom for anti-Semitism, and the subsequent year was the second highest year. And we still have a significant problem within the United Kingdom. Part of the issues that we've had are the levels of protest on the streets of our cities. And often the routes of those protests go past our places of worship and have a chilling effect upon the ability of our communities to go about their own business peacefully. And often we've found that police have been going through a learning process to grapple with the extent of the activity that's happening, the occupation, for example, of railway stations, which meant that there was a direct impact on the ability of commuters to use those places. And worse than that, we've had many instances now of direct action where premises of family offices, law firms, which have an involvement, a connection with the community or with Israel, have been targeted, where windows have been smashed, red paint has been thrown around the place, and that again is an attempt to kind of chill the ability for our community to live its life and go about its ways peacefully. The government is engaging with some of these issues. There's legislation going through Parliament at the moment which will impact the ability on protesters to wear masks to shield themselves from accountability, or to go within a close distance of places of worship or other communal places. But it's taking time for the country as a whole to respond to these issues. The government's also had to increase significant amounts of funding to protect our communal institutions and also to sponsor education and training within our schools. One of the biggest challenges that we have is the impact on the civil space. It's the erosion of people's confidence in the workplace and an increase in the number of complaints that there have been of discrimination and feeling of isolation and being ostracized, and also within the arts and cultural space as well, where there's a sort of there's a spoken but also an unspoken boycott of Jewish institutions, and a squeeze on the ability of Jews to participate in certain civic spaces as well. So we have many challenges, but I also want to emphasize the resilience that we have as well as a community, and the importance that we all have, I'm sure collectively here, not to allow those who hate us to define what we are. And for all that's happened, in many ways, Jewish communal life has been strengthened, and there's a greater sense of solidarity and a greater deepening of Jewish identity. Thank you very much. And so over to Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here this afternoon for this very important discussion. My name is Betsy Korn. I'm the incoming chair of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. 80 years after the end of World War II, we gather here in Berlin, leaders from the world's largest Jewish communities, to affirm a simple truth. We will not allow hatred to define our future. This inaugural J7 report is more than a set of grim statistics. It is a moral reckoning. It tells us what our communities already feel, that the pain of October 7th still reverberates, and that anti-Semitism is surging across continents. Anti-Semitic incidents in the United States rose for the fourth consecutive year, reaching 9,354 total incidents. Since October 7th, the majority of anti-Semitic incidents are related to Israel, showing the clear connection between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. These incidents are taking place on college campuses, in the healthcare space, in city councils, in K-12 spaces, and on the streets. Unfortunately, the groundswell of anti-Semitism in the United States shows no signs of abating. The J7 gives us the opportunity to learn from each other, as similar challenges face all of our communities. Together, we reaffirm our commitment to stand for our people, to speak with one voice, and to help secure a safe, more exclusive world for generations to come. It reflects the strength of that collective voice and the unwavering resolve that has carried our people forward Lador Vador from generation to generation. Our presence here in Berlin, 80 years after the Holocaust ended, carries a purpose. The words, never again, are not merely spoken, but lived every day by each of us. Thank you.
Thank you all for your statements, for your discipline as well. We are right on time. So I would now open the floor to questions here in the room and online. Online, I would ask you to write it in the chat in English so that we can discuss the question here in the room. Yeah, is there already a question of someone here in the room? I think maybe in the chat it will take some time. Yeah, Mr. Reisen, right?
Thank you. Clay Reisen from the New York Times. You paint a consistent portrait across all the communities, but in different communities, do you see similar solutions, or are they unique to each country or community? Thank you.
Is the question for anyone who wants to answer, or specifically? Okay.
Anyone who wants to answer.
Okay. Okay, Alex.
I think certainly the answers to these problems will depend on the community, depending on the dynamics, on the manifestations of anti-Semitism, the current laws that are in place and the law reforms that we believe are necessary, education, all these sorts of factors are unique country by country. But certainly, as we've learned from being part of this association of communities, this J7, there are enormous similarities in what we're each enduring. And the response to fighting anti-Semitism begins with leadership. And fundamentally, if you look at the countries that succeeded in countering anti-Semitism in the immediate aftermath of October 7 versus those who I would say failed, I think the biggest difference was the political will to combat anti-Semitism, to call it out without equivocation, to show strength. And I think where we had strong law enforcement and political will, we had the best outcomes in combating anti-Semitism. That has to be a common unifying factor in combating the scourge. Thank you.
Somebody else has something to add? Marina?
Thank you. I agree with my colleague from Australia, and I will add to that the education that is so important. And when we talk about education, it's not just education of what happened in the past and Holocaust education, but it's education on Jewish life today in each country. It's not enough to teach about dead Jews. We need to teach about the living ones and to explain to the younger generation what is anti-Semitism, why it's wrong, and what it's doing to democratic societies, so they will be part of fighting this type of hatred. We also, I think all of us agree here on the need to combat online hate, and for the especially social media platforms, but not only, to have better regulations in fighting not just anti-Semitism, but any kind of extremism. And this goes beyond social media to other platforms, including Wikipedia, for example, the gaming industry, and so on, where so many young people in primary school, secondary school, and university are exposed to so much hate and discrimination. I assume that we all agree that better policies need to be in place, better legislations, but beyond that, it's about a whole of society solution. So it's not just on policies that are coming from governments, but also civil society to be more engaged in fighting anti-Semitism. Universities need to do more to fight anti-Semitism on campus. And really each one in society has a role to play, if it's online or offline in real life to become an ally to Jews in their own country and society and protect them from anti-Semitism.
I would just want to put a fine point on that, and that because I agree with what everyone just said, but we've all seen in the past that anti-Semitism metastasizes, and we need to continue, as Marina pointed out, education, and that what starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. We've seen that in the past, and we need to have a holistic approach to end any kind of hate and promote a civil society of morality.
In addition to new policies that are required to address gaps, there's also a fundamental need to ensure accountability by using the policies and laws that are already on the books that are all too often ignored. And what we're seeing happening because of a failure of leadership in many instances is the erasure of that indelible line of what's acceptable and not acceptable in a democratic society. And if we don't reinstill that accountability for hate, it's far more than just the Jewish community that's in danger. And we have to be laser focused on that.
Okay, another question, Ms. Marburg.
Yeah, hello, Mascha Malburg from the Jüdische Allgemeine Jewish newspaper in Germany. The J7 was founded before October 7th, just before it. And I just wondered if some of you could share what their initial thoughts about it was what the initial idea was about coming together in this format, and how that might have changed after October 7th, as all of you have emphasized how this date really changed your communities, and how like maybe this network supported or helped you in some way afterwards.
Well, the idea came when Jonathan Grillblatt, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, came to Paris in 2022, I think, and I was president of the CRIF, elected a few months before, and we thought that it would be important to have a global platform in order to share experience with communities having the same kind of issues, because smaller communities have different kind of issues usually. The fact that we have common views on the threats and the challenges enables to have maybe a stronger cooperation between our communities. And of course, after October 7th, this vision unfortunately proves to be true, and we know that the threat is global and the answer has to be global too.
Yeah, Alex, please.
So as you've heard, this idea, this notion of this alliance of communities came about before October 7, and it was incredibly prescient, visionary, I would say. And we understood then that, I suppose, the writing was on the wall. My community in that previous year already reported a 40% increase in anti-Semitic incidents. We'd seen through the COVID pandemic a new rise in conspiratorial thinking, and the Jews were very much swept up in that. The notion of Jews as poisoners, as seeking to take people's liberties away, as profiteers, all these sorts of things were resurgent. And post-October 7, we very much used this network as therapy, as catharsis, but far more so to steer our communities through the most damaging and difficult time for many of us in the histories of our communities. I can certainly say that for the Australian Jewish community. This has been the most difficult time in the history of our community. And in terms of practical outcomes that we've achieved, for example, in Australia, shortly after October 7, there was a mass doxing of Jewish artists and creatives, where over 600 Jewish Australians had their personal details, addresses, workplaces maliciously shared by anti-Israel activists. We knew from experience that the ADL, which is one of the members of the J7, had successfully advocated for the passage of laws against doxing in Washington state. We then used that as a model to advocate for successful laws to be passed of that sort in Australia. So it's been useful in so many ways in terms of the university encampments, which began in the US and flowed to Australia and places around the world. Again, developing these common strategies and approaches, it's been extremely useful.
Yeah, Noah Shek.
I'll just add that the threat of anti-Semitism is a threat to democratic societies, and the opportunity for the Jewish communities, from the largest Jewish communities in the democratic world, to come together and work on solutions and go back to our governments and encourage them to lead is an essential ingredient in the fight.
Adrian Cohn and then Mauro Bernstein.
I just want to add there's a challenge for liberal democracies, which is the extent which you allow conflicts to which are happening overseas to be imported into your own cities as well. And in the UK, we see this not just with regard to Israel and Hamas, but also, for example, there's a lot of anxiety now over what's happening between India and Pakistan. And there are other conflicts as well, such as around Syria. And also recently, we've had a group of Iranians who've been arrested on terrorism charges. So there's a great concern about conflict being imported into our streets. And it's really, it's a point which Noah just made really, which is the extent to which as civil societies, we are concerned to give a focus to people being able to enjoy their lives and be able to go about their way of life in a peaceful way and not being impacted by people who want to take conflict and bring it into our streets. Close to where I live, there have been regular weekly protests against Israel, and we succeeded in having conditions imposed on those protests and having them moved. But unfortunately, they were allowed back again just last Friday. They're always on a Friday evening when it's an area with heavy Jewish residency, when people are going to the synagogue. And these are very focused, targeted and intimidatory protests. And it's taken a lot to instill, to engender the determination in our police and law enforcement agencies to deal with this. And now, hopefully, it has been dealt with again and conditions will be imposed. But it's that kind of thing. I just use it as a small example of what we've had to deal with in the UK. And my impression, even more so in Australia and Canada, with a lack of political will to actually protect the interests of local residents. And that's a universal problem that does extend beyond the Jewish community.
A short before something we had before, antisemitism has no borders, and neither our cooperation has.
Yeah. Are there any more questions in the room? I don't see anything online. So maybe if someone plans to write a question, just state it, and then we wait until you have completed it. If not, I will ask in the group if there are something anyone wants to add as words. Yeah.
I would like just to add the obvious, but it's important to state it here. The issue of anti-Semitism obviously is not a problem just in the J7 countries, but we're seeing it around the world in all Jewish communities, unfortunately, without exception. So when we talk about fighting anti-Semitism, it's not just in the J7 countries, but it's really around the world. And there's a responsibility to the world leadership in our countries and beyond, as well as the international community, the UN and international organizations, to do more to protect Jewish communities, especially in those countries with small Jewish communities where their own governments are simply not doing enough to protect them. And again, thank you all for being here.
Okay, if there are no more questions online and here in the room, I would end the press conference and would ask you to pose for a group photo for the photographers here in the room. Okay, now there's a question. Okay. Yeah. Sarah Hoffmann from the Deutsche Welle asks if you could give some more examples of anti-Semitic incidents that Jews in the 7 countries experienced. So maybe something from the ground. Yeah.
Sure.
Alex.
I've got plenty to draw on. Look, in Australia, there was a very clear and discernible progression in incidents. So as the news of October 7 was breaking, there was a gathering of several hundred young men, masked men, at the forecourt of our most iconic landmark, the Sydney Opera House. These men were burning Israeli flags and chanting things like Kaiba Kaiba, O Jews, the armies of Muhammad are coming, F the Jews, gas the Jews, and so forth. No police action was taken at that point. We then had a progression from there to street abuse, harassment. I spoke about the doxing. We had university encampments where things got to a point where Jewish students and academics were advised to remain off campus because their safety could not be ensured. And then we moved to a whole new disturbing phase, which our country has never seen in any realm, let alone in anti-Semitism, which is where we saw the burning of a synagogue in Melbourne, burnt almost to the ground, a synagogue built by survivors of the Holocaust. And that was just the beginning of our horrors. And then in the months that followed, there were several incidents of cars being set alight in predominantly Jewish neighborhoods, daubed with slogans like F the Jews and F Israel. And then I had the experience of waking up one morning to find that my former home, which is very close to my current home, was deliberately targeted. Red paint was daubed on the facade of the house. 2 cars in front were set alight. And it was a terrifying experience for the current owners, for all the neighbors. It really shook the community and the country to its core. We then had, a few days later, the burning again to the ground of a childcare center, Jewish-owned childcare center adjacent to a synagogue. So when my colleagues before made the observation that what begins with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews, this is the illustration of that. This anti-Semitic terror ensnared the entire country. The majority of the victims, financially and psychologically, weren't Jews. And again, this speaks to a lack, I believe, of political will and early intervention on the part of the police and the government to actually deal with this problem in an effective manner. And then we saw more anti-Semitic actors take advantage of this situation. You had the entry of the far-right neo-Nazis. You then had organized crime carrying out attacks. And that's when you get to a point where anti-Semitism becomes effectively uncontrollable.
Okay, yeah, Betsy and Noah wants to add, and then we have another question online.
So many of you have probably followed what's been happening at the American college campuses, but I'll just add that because I've been involved with a few of them, and these Jewish kids almost immediately, really even the afternoon of October 7th, were targeted, were harassed. Some of them felt uncomfortable going back to their dorms. Mezuzahs were taken off of their rooms. It was impossible to walk across campus because of the protests. And as upsetting as that was, it was very frustrating to see so many administrations on these college campuses really have a double standard for these Jewish kids. They would not have allowed this to happen with any other minority student or really any other student. And I heard firsthand, because I spoke at some of these campuses, where the kids that talked about being harassed and complained, they were told to go to mental health services. So their complaints it made it look like it was their fault. And it was really upsetting. I think we're seeing things changing this year. Things are getting better, but these kids are 18, 19, 20 years old, and they weren't equipped to deal with it.
I've heard more examples of anti-Semitic incidents in the last 18 months than in the last 18 years of working on these issues. And I'm not going to give you a laundry list. I'll just zero in on one specific incident that I think illustrates the phenomenon all too well. It's the story of an 11-year-old girl who, in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, was going to school like any other 11-year-old girl. She happened to be Jewish and one of the only Jewish kids in her school. And some other students, at the behest of a teacher, staged an anti-Israel protest that quickly turned into her being swarmed by around 40 students, I believe, being shouted at that Jews don't deserve to live, that the Jews should die, that she doesn't belong here. The vicious bullying and intimidation led to an assault. And the outcome of all of this wasn't any discipline for the students involved, no educational program brought into the school, no lessons learned. The 11-year-old student was removed from her class and ultimately had to switch to a different educational institution in order to be safe. That's not the Canada that I grew up in. That's not what liberal democracies are supposed to look like. That's not what accountability for hate needs to be. Yet that's the situation we're facing. I'm here with my colleagues 80 years after the end of the Holocaust in Berlin, gathering together with joint resolve to fight this fight and find solutions. Yet back home in Canada, on an almost weekly basis, there are calls for the Jews in our country to be sent back to Europe. That's the reality that we face.
Yeah, we have one more question online. We are nearly at the end of our time. So if there are another question, please write it now, and then we will deal with it afterwards. It is also possible to write after the press conference to all the institutions, organizations, if there are further questions, and then they will be answered via mail. So we have Jonathan Rothman from the Canadian Jewish News, and he asked if there are any plans to further the J7 coordination regarding democratic institutions with learnings from all the federal elections following those of late in UK, US, Canada, soon Australia. I would add Germany, and maybe interesting for all. Just before we arrived here for the press conference, the J7 group had a private meeting with the federal president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier of the Bundesrepublik Deutschland. And so, yeah, maybe someone of you wants to add, and that we are clearly are very often speak with all the democratic institutions in our countries. Is that Noah again?
Well, since the question's coming from Canada, I'll start the answer. Yeah, our resolve is strengthened by being together at this meeting, and we will continue to speak regularly and to coordinate and continue to work together to stand up for the values of liberal democracies around the world and pushing back against anti-Jewish hatred.
Yeah, well said. Okay, then, yeah, sure.
Just before we close, I want to express our joint deep support to the families of the hostages that are still waiting for their return. They've been hearing different rumors in the past days about the situation of their loved ones. And we are all not just praying and thinking, but taking constant action to make sure that they are liberated from Hamas in Gaza and being brought back to their families. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, the last question from Dave Gordon, Jewish News Syndicate. I would say maybe it's for everyone in our countries, it's different. What are our ethnic and other community allies helping with vis-a-vis fighting anti-Semitism? I think Dave, if you have the question specifically for some country, you can reach out to them afterwards. And now I would close the press conference and yeah, ask you for the group photo. I was there 50 minutes ago, but I'm happy for the interests online and here in the room, of course. Thank you all. Thank especially you. And yeah, thanks.